The police officer stopped her on the courthouse steps and said one sentence. He said, "People like you don't belong here." Then he slapped her. It wasn't during an arrest. It wasn't late at night. It happened in front of a courthouse in broad daylight with people watching. The woman staggered as her briefcase hit the stone steps. Papers scattered everywhere. 30 minutes later, that same officer would be standing in a courtroom, unable to speak. Because the woman he assaulted wasn't a suspect. She was the judge. Officer Keller stepped directly into her path. He said, "Where do you think you're going?" Elaine answered calmly, "Inside the courthouse." Keller looked her up and down and replied, "Not dressed like that, you're not." She reached into her bag and said, "I can show you my identification." Keller didn't look. Instead, he knocked the briefcase out of her hands. Papers exploded across the steps. As Elaine bent down instinctively, Keller shouted, "I said stop resisting." She looked up and said, "I'm not resisting." That's when he hit her. An open-handed slap. Loud, public, people froze, someone gasped. Another officer laughed and said, "Here we go again." Keller twisted Elaine's arm behind her back and forced her against the stone wall. "People like you need to learn your place," he whispered near her ear. Metal handcuffs snapped around her wrists. Phones came out. No one intervened. Elaine didn't fight. She didn't scream. She looked past Keller, up at the courthouse seal carved into the stone above the entrance. She was standing less than 20 feet from her own courtroom, and the system she had served for more than 2 decades was arresting her like a criminal. Inside the courtroom, Officer Ryan Keller looked calm. His uniform was straight. His voice was steady. He had done this before. When the temporary judge asked what happened outside, Keller didn't hesitate. He said the woman was acting suspicious. He said she refused to follow instructions. He said she became aggressive when asked to identify herself. Then he added, "I used only the minimum force necessary for officer safety." The prosecutor nodded. Another officer took the stand and backed him up. He said, "She was yelling, causing a disturbance." No one mentioned the slap. No one mentioned the briefcase. No one mentioned the phone's recording. Elaine sat at the defendant's table, handcuffed, silent. The story had already been decided. When the judge finally asked if the defendant wished to speak, the room expected excuses. Elaine stood slowly. Her voice was calm. Not emotional, not defensive. She said, "Your Honor, several statements made by the officer are factually incorrect." The room shifted. Elaine explained she was walking on a public sidewalk approaching a public building. She mentioned constitutional protections casually, not dramatically, like someone used to being heard. Then she said something that made the prosecutor pause. "I formally request that all surveillance footage from the courthouse entrance between 8:45 and 9:15 a.m. be preserved." The judge leaned forward. Elaine added, "This includes security cameras, officer body cameras, and any recordings made on personal devices." Officer Keller's jaw tightened. The judge called for a short recess. As people stood, a courthouse bailiff stared at Elaine. He'd seen her before, not like this. His face drained of color. In a holding room nearby, Elaine sat quietly as the bailiff unlocked her cuffs with shaking hands. He whispered, "Ma'am, I think I know who you are." Elaine met his eyes and said softly, "Then you know what I need." She asked him to bring something from her chambers. Her judicial robe and her gavel. Outside, Officer Keller paced. He didn't know why his chest felt tight, but for the first time that morning he was afraid. When court resumed, the room felt different. People whispered. The prosecutor avoided eye contact. Officer Keller stood stiff, trying to look calm. Then the bailiff spoke. "All rise." The courtroom doors behind the bench opened, and the woman Keller had arrested walked in. She wasn't wearing a blazer anymore. She was wearing judicial robes. The bailiff announced, "The Honorable Judge Elaine Carter presiding." The room froze. Officer Keller's face drained of color. The temporary judge stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly across the floor. Elaine took her seat behind the bench, and looked directly at Keller. Then she said calmly, "Officer Keller, you may remain standing." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult him. She let the evidence do the work. A screen behind the bench lit up. Security footage played. The courtroom watched as Keller blocked her path, knocked the briefcase away, slapped her. Gasps filled the room. Elaine paused the video and said, "Officer Keller, do you see any aggression from the defendant in this footage?" He said nothing. Next, body camera audio played. Keller's voice echoed, "She doesn't belong here. I'll teach her." Another officer laughed. The prosecutor slowly sat down. Elaine looked back at Keller and said, "You testified under oath that your body camera malfunctioned." She tapped the screen. "It didn't." Keller's knees trembled. Elaine closed the video feed and addressed the courtroom. She explained this wasn't random. It was familiar, too familiar. She revealed that Keller had been named in dozens of complaints. Same language, same accusations, same outcome. Unsubstantiated, every time. She explained arrest patterns, disproportionate force, dismissed cases. Then she looked directly at him and said, "You didn't mistake me for someone dangerous. You mistook me for someone powerless." The room was silent. Because everyone understood now. This wasn't about one slap. It was about a system that allowed it to happen again and again. Judge Elaine Carter didn't rush the final moment. She looked at Officer Ryan Keller and said, "You told this court that actions have consequences." She paused. "And today you were right." She listed the charges calmly: assault, false arrest, perjury under oath, civil rights violations under color of law. Keller's lawyer leaned in to whisper something. Keller didn't respond. He stared straight ahead. Elaine finished, "This court finds you guilty." The gavel struck. The sound echoed. Keller was taken away in silence. Months later, the fallout spread far beyond that courtroom. Every case Keller had touched was reviewed. Convictions overturned. An internal investigation exposed years of ignored complaints. 2 officers resigned. 1 supervisor was charged. The department was placed under federal oversight. Judge Carter returned to the bench the next morning. Same courthouse, same seat, same responsibility. The difference was this. That day reminded everyone watching that justice doesn't work because of uniforms or power. It works when someone refuses to stay silent. Because sometimes the person you think is powerless is the one who decides your fate.